Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to Critica.NYC, a show dedicated to the work, life, and politics of the Latinx community in New York City and beyond. Today, I am super excited because we are going to be talking about Afrodominicanas and podcasting and how these dynamic women are really changing the game in podcasting. Podcasting has really become all the rage. And today I actually read an interesting article by a leader in the podcasting industry. Her name is Juleka Lantigua Williams, who is also Afro-Dominicana. And she wrote a piece for the Pacific Content where she talks about her predictions for podcasting in 2021. And two of the big predictions that she talked about is one, that the podcasting industry now has become a $1 billion ad revenue industry. And second, that diversity will be very important as the podcasting industry grows. So today we are joined by two pairs of dynamic duos that have their podcast, each of them very different and unique in terms of their point of views, their sound, and their message. But the things that really unify them and that brings me to them is one, that they're both by Afro-Dominicanas from New York City, and two, that they are really concerned about talking about the different issues that impact our communities in New York City and beyond, and really give depth to many of the issues that they discuss. So today we have from the Bag Ladiez, Rafaela Urbe, who's also known as Lina, and we have Cynthia Pimentel, who is also known as Estephanie. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we also have the pair from Rocio and Mercedes. Rocio Mendez joins us, and Mercedes Ilaraza. I hope I said your last name right. And both of them are from Rocio and Mercedes. Thank you so much for the four of you to join us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
Great. So, I just also want to note that Rocio is also the daughter of our executive producer, Zenaida Mendez. And, I always want to make sure that I give her proper shout out. So let's get started. I want to, hear from you guys. And I really want to know about, how did you come into podcasting and why did you decide to start, working together? And I would love for us to start with the Bag Ladiez. They are celebrating their 5th anniversary, woohoo, which is huge. And, you guys have been in the game, for a long time. 5 years is a long time in the podcasting world.
Yes. It's always shocking every time a new year comes around because we're like, oh my God, we could have had a 5-year-old going to kindergarten remotely. So it's super exciting and super with great honor that people still listen to our show and continue to come back. So we started the podcast just like as everyone else. Everyone's like, we're two friends that talk and we think we're pretty funny. And at that time I was getting into podcasting and I listened to one of a very big podcast called The Read, which was super popular. It still is, love their content. And then I was like, I don't hear a lot of Black Latinx folks talking. And I also didn't hear people with the same dialect accent in the ways that the people in my neighborhood sound like, the way I sound like, the way my parents sound like. So I and Lina were like, yo, let's create a podcast. And like, you know, if you listen to our first episodes, it's literally us trying to figure out audio, trying to figure out content, trying to figure out all of those things. But it was definitely a big learning curve. So when we got into it, we just kept consistency was something that we're just, all right, we got to put an episode. We got to tell our friend to tell a friend. And then like, it just kind of fell through there. Well, fell up in a way. Yeah.
That's great. So how did you guys meet? Did you go to school together? Were you neighbors on the block? How did that come about?
Well, so Stephanie and I have actually been friends since elementary school. We grew up in Highbridge, and we went to elementary school and middle school together, and we just stayed friends throughout high school. Like she's been my friend since I was 11 years old, and so we've known each other through a lot of different phases. And that's also part of our podcast. Something that we wanted to really focus on and capture is that we've grown a lot together. And had dedicated ourselves to growing in our friendship. And we wanted to talk about how difficult it is to really grow, to be intentional about building relationships and about working on yourself, and how all of that is also part of how we deal with our own personal baggage.
Yeah. So, and I know, Lina, you are also an attorney, right?
I am, yes. I graduated law school about a year ago, and now I am a Bertha Justice Fellow at the Center for Constitutional Rights. That's my day job.
That's wonderful. That's great. No, and one of the things that I like personally, right? I'm an attorney as well. That, you know, in many of your episodes, you guys actually talk about legal issues and things that are going on, you know, in the Supreme Court, and you guys really delve into that. And I think that that is so important to hear women of color in particular talking about these issues in, you know, really smart ways, right? And even though like the sounds isn't necessarily like hoity-toity, right? It's very much like regular folks talking about an issue, but to have, you know, the faces and the voices of Afrodominicanas talking about this is huge.
Yeah, it's also really important for us to be accessible to people of all backgrounds and from communities that are like ours. We grew up in the South Bronx, and our parents are immigrants from the Dominican Republic. They didn't have a chance to pursue higher education. So we know that you don't have to have a higher education degree in order to understand the things that we're talking about. These are conversations that everyone can be a part of. And so that's also really a part of how we create the show. Like, we want to talk about all the things going on in the world, the really difficult things. We want to talk about political movements, protests, government, all of these things. But these are conversations that we all need to be and should be a part of.
Sure. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I wanted to touch on in terms of the Bag Ladiez show, like it really does remind me a lot of when I hang out with my friends and we start ranting and raving about whatever the latest issue is. You know, I think that, you know, if podcasting was accessible to me more when I was in my 20s and early 30s, I totally would have like jumped on the bandwagon. And so, you know, how did you get there? Do you have mentors? Do you have people that like help guide you like through this process in terms of developing your show?
Yeah, I think our biggest goal is for the things that we talk about to make it feel like you could talk about this with anybody, right? Because no matter what the world throws at us, like we're all affected by it. So it's so important for us to continue to have these conversations with each other. The way that I will talk, like we were all watching the same news, we're all watching the same protests. And so when we're talking to our friends about it, we're all thinking about it. Why not talk about it together? And for mentorship, I think one, it's very important to know what's out there in the space. I think the first thing I did was like, I was just looking at people. I was like, yo, like, what are people doing? What are like what do I like about this show? Oh my God, this show is so good. And so like in the beginning, we were kind of just like going through YouTube University, right? We were going on Google University. We were just like Googling how to figure out things. Like I, in college used to like play with music and like mix music. So I understood what audio looked like and like how to edit and things like that. But when it came to editing audio, I was like, yo, I don't know what microphone. I gotta get a compressor. Well, hold up. I don't know what that is, what that do. So like once I started Googling, I started finding out other people, hey, like, yo, use this, use that. So like we build a small community. We have this small community called the BBB, which is a whole bunch of different podcasts that talk about similar things. It's Queer Walk, Tea with Cream and J, Marsha's Play, Inner Whole Uprising. And it has been such a great, like we created this like mini sisterhood of like a small collective. We created a small collective of like people who are just talking about podcasts. Like, hey, like get this, get that. Like, hey, this is how I learned. Check this out. So us searching for content that was similar to ours, we found people in that community to help us and like push us through better content and creating better shows.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to make sure that we add that you guys are also alumni of the Manhattan Neighborhood Network as well, right? This is how you guys started in all of this, right?
Yeah, when we were in high school, we actually took part in this program called City Scholars, and it was like a work readiness, like leadership program. And during one of the years that we did it, we actually created content on MNN at the 59th Street studio, and we did like, I think we made like 2 like specials about like different issues that like teenagers were going through. So that was really a really eye-opening perspective, and also I think really important to us in terms of instilling in us that interest in media and media creation, and also that we have perspectives that are not usually in mainstream media.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's really wonderful. So now, I want to bring it to Rocio Mercedes. You guys, like me, right, started doing this new endeavor, right, during, at the onset of the pandemic. And I've been watching and seeing, the content that you all have put out. Can you tell us a little bit about, your history, Rocio and Mercedes, in terms of how you guys met, what brought you together, and, what was the moment that you said, okay, it's time for us to put our podcast together?
Yeah, sure. We are both actors, and we met in a film class where we were able to, it was a very unique film class at a place called the Independent Film School, where not only did you act, but you also wrote and directed. So it was something called a lab. So you did multitude of things that had to do with filmmaking. And that's how Mercedes and I met. And very soon, sorry, truck going by. Very soon after that, I actually wrote a short film that I produced and had Mercedes be the co-lead with me. So we did a film that I wrote and produced. And since then, we've been living in the same neighborhood. I think we've known each other for about 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah.
Just about. And now we live in the same neighborhood, and the pandemic happened. We were like, we could sort of hang out as long as we're safe about it. Even pre-pandemic, we wanted to do more content and more stuff. We were just trying to figure out what it was. And then when George Floyd died, it hit obviously everybody, and it hit us really strongly. And we kept talking about the dynamics and the just the, how do I want to say, the perspective and how confusing it was being a Black Latina, a Black Dominican, and like what roles did we play, because we supported Black Lives Matter, but it felt a little confusing at the time to know how to represent myself in it. whether I was, crossing the line because I'm not African American, but I'm Black, having a Latinx perspective of that. And we kept talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And finally, somehow a podcast came about because we also were questioning things about being Dominican and our own histories and like how we grew up and stuff about hair and like the racism that we had in our family and our communities that we experienced together when we were growing up. And we were like, we should just talk about this. Let's talk about this and find out more because we don't know much about a lot of these questions. And maybe this is a way we could build content, hang out, and build a community with this podcast. I hope I explained it okay.
Yeah, you did.
No, you
Yeah, I mean, because we're artists, right? We always, you've got creative people at home during COVID. It's like we were going crazy, with the need to express ourselves, whether it's through writing, through acting, to just creating. We needed that and that source of connection. And when Black Lives Matter happened, there were so many amazing IGTVs going around on Instagram that we got inspired. We were like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't click fast enough to watch the next IGTV, And so I was like, I have more to say. So, I would call Rocio, we would have these amazing conversations and dialogue. And, we also, when we were in our class, I mean, just like everyone else, you always look for who looks like you, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, ooh, she looks like me. Oh, her name is Rocio. Where's she from? So, just creating that community and then us having so many things in common because of our background, but not having a space to be able to have these conversations. And so we were like, you know what? Let's just create that space. Let's create that space where we can find other people that have similar experiences, especially when it comes to embracing our Blackness, because I felt that we didn't have enough of those spaces and coming from a place of celebration and love. And we know that we don't know all the answers, but we're like, okay, let's bring people who may, and let's keep, having a space for people to have this conversation.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. I think that even, the same happened with me, right? The first episode that I did for Critica.NYC was about, anti-Blackness in the Dominican community. And it was because of an incident that had occurred in Washington Heights. And we had, folks who do community work, our public intellectuals come and comment and discuss these issues. And I think that, the fact that we are here, the fact that each of you have decided to, put your voices out there also really shows that the Dominican community in New York City and in the United States has kind of like graduated to the next level of how we participate in debates and in dialogues, right? Because I think, traditionally our community is very political, right? And we get involved in politics. I'm sure you or your family members, AKA, like, for example, my mother and my father, they're glued to the TV right now with what's happening in the Dominican Republic. And, this issue of transparency and corruption and bringing the people to be accountable, and they're watching what's going on, with the Poder Judicial, and we're talking about it all the time, and so they are like super engaged in what's going on over there. And so I have also been interested in seeing that same level of engagement and discussion happening with U.S. Dominicans, right? For us to have that level of engagement of wanting of, literally they wake up like 7 a.m. and they're already watching what's going on, And so the fact that all of you and we are here, I think, is huge. And so I would love to, hear from you a little bit more in terms of what are your perspectives on that? How do you see, the field as, you are doing your work and you're deepening your work in the podcasting industry? And I would love to, start with the Bag Ladiez.
Yeah, I think for sure we all know in podcasting that there is a big issue with lack of diversity throughout all of the platforms, all of the genres. Like, we know that there is a lack of diversity. And our goal is to continue working and talking about things that matter to us, because I think as we're starting to see in the world, like everyone in the world, everybody is trying to figure out what is the best way for us to live. And sometimes that takes getting politically involved, things like that. And I think it's important in our podcast space to continue having those conversations, because the goal is to have the conversation. It's totally fine if you don't understand everything, because we're human, we're not going to understand everything, right? But it's important for us to continue to have those conversations and to put ourselves out there. And I think it's just important for people to really podcasting and voice is so impactful and so powerful. Especially when you're like listening to things. Like, I think people are like, oh, I don't want to listen to the news, right? But like, oh, well, I'd rather listen to like these two hosts talking about it. It's the same information, but I like the way that they talk about it. I like the way that they connect things to my culture, to my neighborhood, to the things that matter to me. So yeah, I hope I answered the question. I feel like I did.
Yeah, no, I think you absolutely did. I think that that's what's important, that people are we're seeing each other, right? Having this conversation, and the fact that like we have the capacity. We are super smart. We have brilliant people with really good ideas, and we're not seeing necessarily ourselves like on CBS or NBC or CNN, right? You're not going to see us making our commentary also unfiltered. There is no like censorship going on. There is no whatever we do to ourselves, right? Wherever we limit ourselves. But like, the sky's the limit, that we have this, ability to be able to just put our voice out there, and it's also like kind of incredible, like how it does take a lot of time, but it's easy to do, and really, but very powerful in terms of, getting our voices out there, amplifying, what is happening out there. And I think the fact that like this movement occurred, for us with Black Lives Matter is also like really important, because I think that our voices are necessary so that, also folks who are involved in Black Lives Matter understand that Afro-Latinos are really thinking about these issues deeply and working on them, and have been working on them for decades, right? This is nothing new to us. What may be new is the fact that we're getting more and more people to actually talk about it. Like, for example, I was really impressed that, this past week, there was the Dominican Studies Conference that was hosted by Hostos Community College. And there was a whole panel, talking about Black Lives Matter and Black identity in the Dominican community. And like, from my perspective, I'm like, wow, this conversation has really moved in the last 20 years, and now it's even just beyond like, my hair or my skin color, but now it really is about, how do these policies impact me as a person, as a Black person in the Americas, in the United States, in the Dominican Republic. So, let's talk a little bit more about that. Rocio and Mercedes, what would you guys like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really poignant what Estephanie said about the relevance or the importance of talking to the mic, right? Having our voices be heard, because especially during this time when we do have to wear a mask, the symbolism behind it of how many of us have been wearing a mask even before COVID. In our culture, sometimes our voices we don't have those spaces where our voices can be heard. And so we're all about like changing poison into medicine. With all this craziness going on, it's like, okay, we had to be home. We have to be can't do much, but we can talk. And so we can have a conversation about what is going on in the world. And we also wanted to make sure that we had people come in like Genesis Aquino, who was one of our guests, and talk to us about the importance of local elections. There's so many things that we don't know about or aren't aware of how important our voices are. And so when we had interviewed Genesis or Zenaida, they broke it down on so many levels of how important it is to speak your voice. And so we are just creating that platform to continue these conversations.
They also reminded us how valuable we are and how valuable our voices are to the community, to public officials, and to making policy. Because we forget that we are being silenced and oppressed, and that if we can vote, we can complain. I don't want to say that word, but we can state our needs, and we can do specific actions to make it happen. So they both reminded us that, wow, we have choices here, and we could do more things for us as individuals and for a community to come together and unify and make change for the better.
Yeah. Lina, so if we can hear from you, I would love to know what has been your most favorite part of this whole process, and what has been your favorite episode that you guys have worked on?
My favorite episode. Well, I'll start with I think my favorite part of this whole process has been tied to building community. Just the fact that we have been able to get into this industry and build a community of other podcasters, like Estephanie had mentioned before, but also that we keep seeing that over the 5 years that we've been creating Bag Ladiez, we've seen a lot more Black Latinx podcasters get into the game. And we've just seen I think that people say that the market is oversaturated, but when it comes to Black podcasts and Black Latinx podcasts, I don't think that it is. I think that there's more perspectives that we are still missing, that we still need to get out there. But it's been great to just see more Black podcasters get into the game and us find each other over social media and really create really meaningful connections. And also with the people who listen to our podcast, who have reached out and told us about their experiences listening to our podcast. We get messages like, oh, I'm a Dominicana in Michigan or in the Midwest or wherever. And listening to this podcast has made me feel connected to my community, to my culture, to other people who think like me. Because I think that our perspective, I also think that it's important for me personally and for our perspective to be the fact that we are second generation, first generation Dominicans who have grown up in the States and also are coming with this radical politic. And we want to talk about feminism. We want to talk about race. We want to talk about womanism. We want to talk about the ways that capitalism affects our existence. And we want to have critical conversations about that. And we know that there are other people in our communities who want to have those conversations too. So the fact that we can find each other now through the internet and create this community, that has been really, really amazing. And it's been very affirming as an individual and also in what we're creating. And I think for my favorite episode, I think we have so many episodes, but I think one of my favorite episodes that we've done is we did an episode with Bad Dominicana, where we talked about Dominican identity, Latinidad, just the experience of what it is to be a Black Dominican woman, and how do you find your joy? How do you create the life that you want when it's very hard when you're a person who does not come from a background with a lot of wealth and privilege to really just carve out a space for yourself and be this is how I want to be in the world. This is who I want to show up as, and to fight for that, because I think that in some ways all of us are fighting to create our place in the world how we want to be in it, and not to be defined by other people's ideas of who we're supposed to be. And I think that that was like an amazing conversation, because it just came from like, I just remember following her on Tumblr and reading and learning so much from her, about Afro-Dominicana identity and feminism, and, you know, the power of femininity. And then to be like, oh, we have a podcast and now she's on it. Like, it was like a very full circle moment.
Yeah. Well, you know, I feel the same way about you guys, all of you guys right now. The fact that you're all right here, I'm like so excited. And I'll tell you this, I first learned about Bag Ladiez. It was through a really good friend of mine. Her name is Carolina Gonzalez. Carolina Gonzalez, she currently works at 32BJ. She does communications work for them. And many moons ago, she was on the editorial board of the Daily News. And, you know, she was like one of these high-ranking Dominicanas. And she was like, oh, you have to listen to the Bag Ladiez. And it was really like the time when I really started kind of paying attention to podcasting, because I really wasn't. And it was a summer. I had sent my daughter away to stay with grandma and grandpa for a month. And I was like, okay, I'm going to dedicate time to listening to podcasts. And I just binged, and I binged on like all your shows. When I drove down from New York to Atlanta, like I just like listened. I was like, okay, I want to listen to, you know, what these women are talking about. Oh my God, I want to talk to them too. You know, and I thought it was incredible. And then, you know, then now it's like, boom, we have Rocio Mercedes come up, and I'm like, ooh, another, like, what's going on? What's going on? And what's interesting is that, in terms of the uniqueness of both podcasts, I see Bag Ladiez, you guys, it's really a conversation between Lina and Estephanie, right? Whereas Rocio and Mercedes have decided to, you know, bring on guests and invite guests. So Rocio and Mercedes, can you tell us a little bit about, you know, why did you make the decision to, you know, arrange your podcast in that way? Why did you want to, you know, bring in, you know, different folks?
Well, we really thought it was important to highlight Dominicans. I don't think we see enough Dominicans on TV, on the radio. And so, you know,
Black Dominicans in particular.
Yeah. You know, people that look like us doing extraordinary things, or, you know, that we, and also we had a lot of questions too about our own community. And, you know, we wanted to bring in people we had a historian, we had an anthropologist come in, so we can ask the questions that we didn't get to ask in school. And so just an array. And because we are artists as well, you know, we wanted to highlight all different types of artists coming in that are Dominican, that people may or may not know about.
Yeah, you know, today there was an interesting post on Instagram. I'm sure all of you know the writer Elizabeth Acevedo, who wrote Clap When You Land. She posted like yesterday, she's like, oh, who are the photographers and artists who are Afro-Dominicanos? I want to know who they are. I want to support. And then a bunch of people posted, and then she started posting everybody's work. And I was like, wow, this is really incredible. Yeah. Like how this happens, right? How we do this crowdsourcing, bring all of our, and then it's like, I also learned about a lot of people I had never heard about, you know? And I also feel you guys on this aspect of, you know, highlighting and amplifying the work that people are doing that don't necessarily get all of that shine, right? Or don't necessarily have access to media in that way, where they are able to talk about the issues that are impacting them, that they've been working on. And so that they are able to get that airtime, right? Like essentially, right, the airtime to, you know, really highlight, you know, what's going on with them and what they're working on, you know, like, for example, you know, on this show, like our last episode, we brought on Maria Lizaldo. She's the executive director of the Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, and we really highlighted the issue of food insecurity. and, how it's impacting, the city and, what resources out there. But we also did talk about, right, the larger issues around like how do budgets get created at the city and the state level and at the federal level? How do these decisions impact us, and how can we, change those decisions, right? And so, I came out of there like really like hyped up. I was like excited about that, because I felt like, we brought something different to the table, and getting people to really think, maybe for some outside of the box, or also like to affirm to other folks who have been thinking the same thing, right? That, wow, yes, this is true, and maybe we should really talk about and do something, differently around these things. Yeah. So, I would love to also hear from you guys, what are your like future plans? I know, right, for Rocio Mercedes, you guys just got started, right? So how do you see your podcast continuing in this evolution? Are you guys also thinking about doing this? Like, do you want to get a piece of the pie of the $1 billion ad revenues that are out there in podcasting world? Are you looking to get to that level, or are you just like, we just really love to do this, and that's kind of secondary?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons we chose our names as the title, Rocio Mercedes, is because we want to be able to, we wanted to be able to evolve to something bigger. So I personally would love a piece of the pie. It seems like it's quite a bit to get there, gatekeepers and all. But at the same time, maybe not, like we're going to try. We're going to try to push through. We're basically almost done recording this season. It'll probably be roughly about 24, 25 episodes. And season 2, we have like a little surprise about both of us that we're excited about. I don't know if I should tell the surprise.
No, don't tell the surprise. We'll wait for that.
But there's a little surprise at the end of season 2 that will open up the podcast to bigger topics that we're really excited about. Still specifically about being Afro-Latina, but it'll widen the scope a bit. So I would love to take this further and further and further. I feel like this is just the beginning, and this is our first time doing this, and I feel like we've already gotten a pretty decent flow, and it's just going to get better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of support that's been really fantastic. And I mean, I don't see us going anywhere, and I would love, I don't know, how much money a year?
Yeah. And also
on your vision board.
As actors, we're so used to like waiting for someone, right, to call us for an audition. And how many of us have, jobs where, your voice is not heard. And so, we want to continue having a space to be able to have these conversations. But so like I saw this quote that I want to read real quick that says, in 2019, less than 5% of active podcasts by and for of the African diaspora exist in the market. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like creating a space on our platform, like Bag Ladiez said, that community, so that we can inspire others to also put their voice out there. So we can continue having these conversations. Like, why is it just a few of us?
Yeah.
The best thing is hearing people like you guys said tell us, oh my gosh, we connected, we related. I've been thinking, how many people we've heard that said, I've been thinking about doing a podcast about this. I've been thinking about writing about what you guys talked about, and just creating that, passing the baton so that more and more of us are out there interviewing people, sharing, talking, and having their voices heard.
Yeah. So, Estephanie, I want to also, I know that you, in terms of your work outside of Bag Ladiez, you're also a writer, author, you're into creating content, you do audio work. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do, how you do it, and how you see how this conversation is going.
Yeah, so I'm like, oh my God, that's so nice. I'm a writer and honestly, thank you. So I am a producer at Wonder Media Network. So I create podcasts from like pre-production to post-production and everything from scripting to like interviewing to booking to all of that cool jazz. I do all of that at Wonder Media Network. I definitely got into the field because of Bag Ladiez. I really doing your own podcast sure shows you how to be a really great producer. And I think, in the scope of like finance and having this $1 billion pie for podcasting, I think the thing about podcasting, like every other industry, is that money isn't really going to diverse voices. And if it is going to diverse voices, it's going to very like people who don't get 100% of what they're being or what they're worth in that aspect. Like, for example, like we have seen in the news a lot about issues of IP and bigger companies taking IP. So like, when someone takes your IP, you kind of lose your entire brand. So like there is so much money, but like we have to also be careful. Like, how do we get like paid in these ways? And I think one thing about Bag Ladiez is like we're very community ran. Like we love creating the podcast for love, and we really want to talk what we preach. You know what I mean? Like if we're taking an ad from a company who's like actively polluting the earth or actively trying to get a pipeline through, like we're like, nah, we can't really mess with you because we're not messing with you. We don't want that either. So it's very important for us to make sure that we have people who take out ads on our show that we're like, I can stand behind. And not obviously like no company is perfect, but like we're very mindful of that. But to bring it back, we ask our communities to be like, hey, if you can donate this much money a month, that will really help. Like we have equipment, we have to like, we were having a lot of cool live shows before COVID, things like that. Like we want to do these things, but we know that creating a podcast isn't 100% free. People think, oh, you buy a microphone, you do this. No, like there's so much time, there's so much labor that we have to give to create an episode every week. On top of that, like these are not our only jobs. So we asked our community of like, hey, can you support us? And our community was like, yeah, you know what? I have $1 a month. I have to here. Yo, here's $20. And we're like, all of those things help us grow and even get better equipment. Be able to get like graphic made. Like we're like, great, we could take our podcast a bit further because of the community work. And we're not really relying on like heavy ads too much, because we're like, yes, when an ad comes, we always want to take it. But I know that there are other ways that we could be sustainable. So like we have decided to take steps like that. So to be able to create our podcast and make it more about like not a livable wage, but enough to cover the podcast costs, because hosting ain't free. Having a website ain't free, things like that. So it is important for us to, ask our community, and our community always like supports us. Like, and again, it's like $1, $2. It's not a lot, but when a lot of people do it, it makes enough for us.
No, and I'm sure that also sends a message to have a podcast that is community supported, and also gives you a certain level of freedom. And also, what's interesting and what I feel like what I'm hearing is, everyone has their different standards of what success looks like. Success doesn't necessarily in the podcasting world isn't necessarily just how much you get in ad revenue or how much you get, in terms of downloads or whatever. Like there are a lot of different markers of success for a podcast. And so what would be like your markers? How do you feel that your podcasts have been successful so far? If we could start with Rocio Mercedes.
Well, already I feel a lot of success in terms of like, I think I want to say from the 3rd episode on, we've had like 4 or 5 regular responding listeners who send us stories or DMs, and they're just like, yo, this happened with my mom last week, and da-da-da-da. And they like literally are conversating about the episode, and already I was like, success, boom. Yeah. Like I feel like we're already hitting that mark because we've hit those like handful of people who are so personally connected that they feel necessary like to hit us up with like a video or just a message. So I already feel like boom, because another reason why I wanted to do this podcast and how Mercedes and I connected so much was how isolated and lonely we felt being Afro-Latinas. And like, you know, I was like the first person in my family to do natural hair and all this stuff, you know, like things like that, where like it was feeling lonely. And like suddenly now I'm like, oh, we're not alone. We have this whole plethora of people. So already I'm just like, boom, milestone, you know, like we've succeeded in connecting to people like us out there that talk about things like we do.
Yeah, like we spoke out of college and we got to talk to these dope students, and they were just sharing their stories and how they connected to the podcast on different topics. And they were like, well, how do we handle this? You know, how do we have the conversation with our parents about this? And just being able to have a space for, you know, people in college that can share. I mean, when I was in college, I didn't have anything like that I could be like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna rock it. And you know what, it's okay. Or you want to talk about it? You want to talk that we're Black, you know? And just having a space where the youth now is having these conversations earlier and not later on. But also we had a parent who was saying, how do I deal with this situation with my child based on something that we talked about on the podcast? So to me, that's success, having that dialogue and opening up those conversations that sometimes people don't have in their own family.
And I would like to add, success would also look like everything, no fires to be blown out every week when we're trying to release an episode. That would also be a great success for us.
That's great. That's great. That's great. And so, you know, I just wanted to, you know, let our viewers know, you know, we have a few minutes left, but I did want to make sure that we let our viewers know that the Manhattan Neighborhood Network does have a program for podcasting and has workshops for people who are interested. So if you want to learn about podcasting, Manhattan Neighborhood Network has courses from, you know, showing you how to podcast from your iPhone, how to edit your podcast, you know, and how to do, whether it's an interview or talk shows, or if you want to do a documentary show. I think that's really, really incredible. Manhattan Neighborhood Network has wonderful teachers, people who are really smart and savvy. And the fact that they are, you know, available, you know, at the El Barrio Firehouse and also at 59th Street, you know, does make it very accessible. And also a lot of the courses are virtual online, you know, so please make sure, you know, if you're interested and you see yourself doing a podcast and you have something to say, because everyone has something to say, everyone has something to add, please go and check out www.mnn.org/learn. So, ladies, all of you, I really want to hear, who are your top podcasts? Who do you guys love to listen to besides yourselves? And you know, if we can start with the Bag Ladies, who are your top podcasts that you love to listen to? Stephanie, you want to go?
Yeah, I was like, we're probably gonna list the same ones. So, but for sure, as always, I really love Marsha's Plate, great podcast. I really love Queer Walk. I love In a Whole Uprising, Tina Cuba J. Also love the Locutoras. I also love I'm not gonna lie, I really do like The Daily. I like The Read. I love Moonface, which is a fictional podcast, which is really great work. Oh God, I have so many. I also worked on a show called Spirited that I really liked. I know that's mine, but I really like that show. It's really great. Oh my God. I mean, I don't think it's fair for me because I work in podcasts. I'm always listening to podcasts. I'm gonna stop, but I have like genres like history. I love lore. So I'm gonna stop. But I have a lot. So
To add a few more to that, I really like Radio Caña Negra. That's a newer podcast, and they're really hilarious and funny. Then there's podcasts like Loose Accents, which features a Dominican, Daniele, who's the co-host of that, talking about her experience as an immigrant to the United States. And then there's some narrative podcasts that are really great, like Moonface is a really beautiful, well-made podcast. And then there's a podcast with, if you like a scary podcast, there's a podcast with Tessa Thompson, who's also an Afro-Latina, called The Right Left Game. And so that one, it's like a story. It's not like the talk show kind of podcast.
All right. You guys are like connoisseurs on the podcasting. I really love it. Rocio Mercedes?
I like, there's one called DLR. It's about dating, love, and relationships. And I love anything relationships. And I like another one called Spermcast, which is about this woman, Molly, and her journey to become a mom, and by any means necessary. So she just puts all her business out there about getting a sperm donor or doing IVF, and just seeing like someone's journey of getting something that they really want and just being candid about it. I love podcasts that are just raw and talk about, everything and anything.
Yeah, I'm a nerd, and I love like human behavior. So I really like NPR's Hidden Brain with Sean Corvidanto. It's really fascinating and really fun. And I've been obsessed with Louder Than a Riot, which is about the criminalization of hip hop and how hip hop has been targeted by police in the United States. And there's another podcast that name I'm freaking forgetting, and it's really upsetting, but it's about living in the prison system. The two hosts, one is a prisoner in San Quentin jail. And
is it Ear Hustle?
Yes, Ear Hustle. Thank you. I love that podcast. It's so good. And I just love how they humanize, the human beings in the prison system and how it works, and kind of debunking all the questions and like really showing that they're just human beings in there who are really trying to do their best at life, just like everybody else. And I really, that podcast, I feel, changed my world. So, yeah.
That's great. I'll share some of my favorite podcasts. I mean, definitely everyone here, I listen to all of you. And I love listening to this astrologer, tarot lady, Jessica Lanyadu. She's from California. I love listening to her. She has a podcast called The Ghost of a Podcast. I listen every Sunday. I also love, of course, Latinos Out Loud. They're from Washington Heights, many of them, and I love listening to their show. And they bring on a bunch of Latino comedians and actors, and it's always, so much fun to listen to them as well. And I also love like documentary podcasts. Like when I first got put onto a podcast, I would listen to 30 for 30. I think it was I think that put out for 30 with ESPN. They would put out really great podcasts. And then I also like all those like relationship ones. Like I love Esther Perel. Like I love listening. She does these shows where she interviews like couples in therapy. And I love listening to the couples. It's like you're sneaking in, hearing about their problems. I love it. So those are some of my favorites.
Those are some good ones. I got to check out some of the ones you guys mentioned.
Yeah,
and there's so much out there.
A really great list. The other thing that, I also want to, that I find interesting is, and that we've talked about throughout this show is, all these different networks that are out there for people who want to get into podcasting. Like one that I do see is Latina Podcasters.
Oh, yeah.
There's a group of Latinas that, I always see them on Instagram, and they're always supporting one another. I think that they're great because they also bring like this level of, kind of like really elevating, Latinas in podcasting in general. It would be great to see one, for Afro Latinas too. Hint. I don't know if it's, something you guys are thinking about. In terms of like highlighting that work. But also, I find it interesting that, this explosion, the explosion that has happened, especially, since everyone has to spend more time inside. Everyone is kind of like figuring out, making sure that we get our voices out there. So these last few minutes, please, take this opportunity, tell our viewers where can they go to check you guys out, what platforms you're on, your handles and all. I'll hand it over first to Bag Ladiez, Lina, if you'd like to, or Stephanie.
Yeah, so you can check us out at our website. It's bgladies.com. You can find us on Twitter at bag_ladies. We're on Instagram as bgladies as well. You can send us an email at bgladies@gmail.com. Let us know what you think about the show. We love to hear from people and just like perspectives about what's going on. We welcome it.
Great, Rocio Mercedes.
Yeah, same. Our website is RocioMercedes.com. Our email is RocioMercedes@gmail.com. Our IG is Rocio Mercedes. Our Twitter is R&M Podcast. And that is it.
Yeah.
If I didn't forget.
And our website is, we keep it simple, Rocio and Mercedes.
Yeah.
Everything is mostly that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much, ladies. I really want to thank all of you for taking this time out to join me today on Critica.NYC and to talk about your journeys in podcasting. This has been really incredible. I want to make sure that we thank the Manhattan Neighborhood Network for always giving us this platform to be able to bring together Latina folks who are really doing incredible work. And I want to thank, of course, our executive producer, Zenaida Mendez, our studio manager, Freddie Pinto, for all of your hard work on the show. And of course, you can always find more information about Critica.NYC at www.critica.nyc. Again, thank you all for taking the time out to be with us today. I hope that we can look at ways that we can collaborate again in the future, look at ways on how we can support one another, because I think, what's happening here is really exciting for all of us, for you and for our community, to have such smart, brilliant women talking about important issues, bringing things to the forefront. And I really hope that you continue to do this work for a very long time. So thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.